So hello and welcome to an introduction to kinetic control, movement evaluation, and I'm joined here by Technical Director Mark Comerford to explore the content of this particular course. So hi Mark.
Oh, hi Lincoln, how are you?
Yeah, good to hear from you.
So we're going to
be looking at this the intro to the start of the course, the intro to KC. So this is a bit of an overview. How did this sort of course come together?
This course came together a little bit from people that not having access to our whole system, so through COVID and the inability to sort of travel a little bit. So trying to give people who might be novices to our system, or people who have had a bit of background but haven't seen the whole system in terms of the big picture, putting the framework of the kinetic control process into a sort of 4-hour sort of presentation, and covering all the key elements of how we build, where we come from, and how we've come through to the process of diagnosing movement control, impairments and loss choices. So coming up with this concept of this, and then all the subsets of where we build from this to come up with become expert clinicians in movement evaluation and movement assessment and movement retraining. Okay,
so thank you for that sort of that overview of it. So we're going to look at a little bit more of the content now in detail. So we're going to sort of just move through this. So one of the things that is in this is going to be the exploration, a little bit of the testing and retraining catalog. And yeah, we've got the sort of the links there, and that's hosted by Physiotech, as you can see. Another factor in there is going to be the book. So again, just want to sort of comment on those, Mark.
Okay. Well, the book we published quite a while ago now, but it's still the handbook of looking at movement control, and coming up with a diagnostic framework to give us a diagnostic framework to look at movement, and then lost choices. The things that are missing from people with the movement, the things that are missing from people's movement when they've got chronic or recurrent musculoskeletal conditions, or also the things that might be missing that lead to sort of inefficiencies in how we move and performance, and also maintaining good function and movement health throughout the entire lifestyle. So the book started it all off, going through the process of testing, coming up with a diagnostic label in terms of the site and the direction of our of movement loss choices, and then strategies to retrain around that. Then to take that a step further, the testing and retraining catalog. That's where we've looked at sort of in terms of the different regions of the body, lumbar spine and the thoracic spine, the neck, shoulder girdles, the hip, looking at sort of a way that we can find look at this process of what ideal, or not necessarily ideal is not a good word, what efficient movement might look like in terms of sharing stress across multiple segments in function, but then also coming up with tests to find out where there might be a problem, where there might be inefficiencies in how we control and coordinate movement, and then based on the tests you fail, there's different, they relate to different functional aspects of the lumbar spine might bend in standing and sitting and in hands and knees. Some of it's on our back, some of it's doing functional things. So there's more than one functional challenge to how we control movement. And so we've got a whole battery of tests for any one particular site and direction. But then in terms of giving us lots of options for retraining those inefficiencies in movement, the lost movement choices. So the training and exercise catalog has been established through Physiotech, and then built around specifically our diagnostic framework of the site and direction of movement choice.
Yeah, okay, so we've got the book then that sort of got the explicit detail behind the approach as well, and also the routes of testing for coordination and site and direction. And then we've got that explored further with the Physiotech catalog for testing, again, retraining, so to address what you found. Okay, so let's just consider as well, we've got also the e-learning content, and this is going to be part of that particular range of different products out there. And we've got other things in terms of tendinopathy. We've got some options in terms of looking at hamstrings and soleus. So there's a whole range of education that's going to be supporting this particular approach. So, okay, we're going to just kind of keep that going.
Yeah.
Yes, and then part of the education as well. If we're just I mean, just touching on what KC is from an education standpoint, about just the sort of the breadth of that.
Okay, so the whole education system is started off as really quite a basic process, but over the last 25 years, it's been developed and expanded so that we can, pretty much looking at sort of all the joint systems in the human body in terms of that, and then building a framework on the same principles. The principles of movement, movement evaluation, movement assessment, identifying sort of inefficiencies in movement that we can fix and we can retrain, don't change anywhere. So we're applying those principles to everywhere, every body segment, every body region, and then we package it up in a couple of different ways. We can do a modular system where people can cover, certain sections in chunks, or we can do the movement solution, which we cover a large program, all integrated together, and people then do it all in a series. So pre-COVID, over approximately a 12-month period of time, in an initial 15-day block, then another 2 5-day blocks to cover the whole concept of what we're trying to introduce in this first 4-hour presentation.
Okay, so I'm going to sort of do a little bit of an overview of that, I think, with our sort of next slide, which this 4 hours is going to be a real intro to this whole route that Mark's just identified there. And we see there's a modular option of there's movement coordination modules, there's muscle synergy modules, and they're broken down by region and approach, I guess. So movement coordination, you're testing and retraining sight and direction. Muscle synergies, you're looking at specific muscles that play specific roles to address deficits and problems you find in these regions. And then there's a masterclass that completes that sort of route. And if you do complete that route, you can, as you say, become a KCMT, so Kinetic Control Movement Therapist, or you could complete the movement solution, that 15 days intensive route, and all that gets you to the same place. We've also got additional masterclasses and also the movement solution 2 and 3. So Mark, just in terms of those additional options there, what do you want to sort of say about that, those next steps?
Okay, well, the first sections, the modular section and the movement solution 1, we're really trying to cover that in terms of the lumbar spine, the hip, the neck, and the shoulder. They're the key areas that everyone needs as the basics to work from. And then taking it, and then once we've done that, applying those principles into the master classes. So, for example, the intensive movement solution 2 covers the sacroiliac joint and pelvis and the thoracic spine and ribs. But if you're going the modular route, you can still do those as 2 separate master classes. And the movement solution 3 covers in particular the lower leg, so there's knee, shin, and foot, and the elbow, forearm, and hand is the peripheral regions of the body. Plus, also looking at a lot of the some of the clinical judgment components of coming up with diagnostic frameworks, fitting it into a process of looking at also evaluating pain mechanisms and tissues that are the source of the pain, rather than the diagnostic framework of the sight and direction of our lost movement choices. So the movement solution 3 covers that, covers the lower leg and the elbow, forearm, and hand, and a little bit of the clinical judgment. But then we've also got myofascial trigger points as a separate component that is add on for everything, because if you've got any chronic or recurrent problem, there's an issue involved in there. Looking at dealing with restrictions, so letting everyone put their manual therapy background and linking it in, dovetailing it in with the movement control sides of things. The clinical judgment is a 3-day masterclass, covers a lot of extra detail on pain mechanisms, pain physiology, differential diagnosis of different pain mechanisms, differential diagnosis of different tissues that are part of that are the sources of current problem symptoms and impairments. And then we're developing further things as we go along too.
Okay, so it's really comprehensive as a framework. It's a clinical reason framework within itself, but also an educational framework sort of really laid out from this first course all the way through to the movement solution 3 in those masterclasses. So that's a really sort of comprehensive overview, Mark. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And the clinical reasoning framework is built in right from day one, all through the process. So it's not like a recipe. There's a process of sort of clinical decisions to be made and how to prioritize the solutions.
Yes, it's really systemized. Is what I always take from the KC way of doing things. Is everything is for a reason, and that's step by step. It's very logical in how it develops. And I think what we're going to look at in this 4 hours is going to really sort of support that that statement. So we see
one of the things that I think is missing a lot is that a lot of therapists work on the traditional model of a diagnosis of pathoanatomy. And one of the things that is very clear as we use this, and also as we work clinically, is that two people with exactly the same symptoms and exactly the same diagnosis of pathology often have different habits, different movement problems, different movement inefficiencies that contribute to the stress on those tissues. And so it's not just about trying to get the diagnosis of what hurts, it's trying to find why it hurts. And so the loss of movement choices, or the diagnoses of the movement control side of things that causes the same pain and pathology, can be very different between two different individuals. And what this process does is identify those causative features so that we can stop it from coming back.
Okay, so it's really exploring underneath just the presentation, and digging into a sort of a movement sort of source, associated source to that problem, and trying to find again the movement solution to it alongside your other sort of skills and reasoning processes. So what we've got now then is we've got kinetic control presented against two other options that we have, which is TPM, the performance matrix, and also movement science practitioner. So in terms of TPM, online software that you can access, and it takes you through a group of multi-joint, multi-sort of function tests to identify site and direction across multiple regions and in all three planes. And this is also done at both low and high thresholds, so it's a bit of a unique sort of quality of this particular testing approach. But then also supported by retraining catalog within that same package, so you can address those things at a low or high threshold that they present. So that's a little bit of a sort of take on it from my side, Mark. So what do you want to add in about sort of TPM?
Well, one of the things that I think is especially different and unique about the TPM is that compared to just the kinetic control and other frameworks of people looking at managing symptoms, is that the people who are most interested in kinetic control are clinicians who are dealing with pain. That's the core group of people who come looking for us about this, and that's what we have really good solutions for. But the principles behind the kinetic control, when they're applied to the TPM, okay, the whole idea is that you don't have to have pain to have a problem in how you move or to change the efficiencies of your movement strategies. You can overuse some things, you can be inefficient in using other patterns of movement. And so the TPM is designed to find inefficiencies and lost movement choices in people who don't have pain. And so we can find risk factors. So that I think is one of the big features of this is, there are some things, there are things that we've lost in the way we perform movement that might be contributing to potential risk of pain, maybe issues of recurrence, but also performance. Okay, and so the idea is that we can find problems or inefficiencies in how people move that affect their movement health for the future, or risk factors for performance in sport, or risk factors for the way that you interact in your workspace, or risk factors for being able to sort of be in your later years and wanting to sort of kick on and do the things that you want to do, like play in retirement, so play golf, tennis, whatever, or just be active with your kids or grandkids, So the idea is that we can find problems, and it's probably better to call them inefficiencies of how we function that affect our movement health and affect the way that we interact with the world, either efficiently or inefficiently. And if we can find those things and change them, we've got potential to decrease risk and enhance lifestyle and performance.
Okay, excellent stuff. Then the final option there, movement science practitioner, is something that's been developed in the last year or so. And again, my take on this, it's taking the ability to observe somebody move and then interpret that against a muscle classification model that you can then try to work out whether how they're moving is, again, we're using that word efficient. So based on the classification model of muscles, is what we're seeing a good match for how they're performing the task, or is there a mismatch between synergy, usage, and performance? So we're pitching this more at individuals who are athletic trainers, personal trainers, and strength and conditioning coaches, and also if you're coming from a wellness side of things, if you're working with Pilates, so you're used to observing movement all the time, and this offers an option to employ that muscle classification model within that particular scenario and setting. So it's about observation and matching that to muscles and movement in a way that we think is very relevant with a model we've used a lot within KC and TPM.
Yeah. I think one of the things that this is targeted for is aiming for people who have an interest in movement or a training background in movement, who don't necessarily have the anatomy and physiology that goes with clinicians, for example. And so so this can be Pilates instructors, alternative therapists, exercise physiologists, coaches, even athletes themselves. They might be interested in sort of how they function. But the idea behind this is not to sort of make it to an anatomy physiology top heavy. We're making it movement observation based. But the idea is that giving people based on a movement classification model, a muscle classification model for function, any particular functional thing you do uses multiple muscles in groups, and the way that the brain coordinates them is appropriate for the task in hand. So there's multiple, and what we've got is multiple muscles that can do any one particular movement, and the brain can change the synergies or the coordination of those. And so the idea is to let people experiment with how they might be able to look at someone and see what they naturally use to do a particular function, and then see can we give them an option to train to do it another way, because training it to do a functional thing with more of a one joint stabilizer role muscle dominant versus a multi-joint power mobilizer role muscle dominant. By changing the way that you use the dominance or the strategies you use can be used to improve endurance, maybe enhance performance, enhance power, or just make movement more robust so it can deal with stress more effectively. But without having to go down the path of getting too anatomy physiology top heavy, look at movement, then experiment with how can you change the way you do a particular movement with your different strategies to give you a lot more options in your movement retraining outcomes.
Mark, I think we're also really sort of alluding to lots of the terms and the ideas that are going to come up through the rest of this KC course we're looking at now. So I think that's again, it's really setting the scene for what's coming, but also what is out there as well. So I'm going to just kind of let's see what's coming next. Okay, so when we're talking about sort of evidence-based practice, I think also on that term I'd use the phrase evidence-led practice. I think that there is, I think for a lot of your own clinical expertise, the process is developing, where you see things that work that are not always supported by there is an RCT showing that this is the way to do it, but you can sort of piece together the evidence to make a good case for what we see within what works. And I think that also inspires the KC process. So both things are coming into this. So again, what can we add to that?
Well, I think one of the things is that evidence-based practice has become a bit of a requirement nowadays for any clinician who's got a registration body, But in reality, what we're talking about is best clinical practice. Okay, and there is actually the structured definition of best practice is based on having the evidence that's available to date, the best research evidence that's available to date, coupled with clinical expertise and clinical reasoning. So making the things that evidence doesn't provide, we can then go back to basic principles, go back to first principles of anatomy, neurophysiology, biomechanics, and if we have a good understanding of the basics of human function, anatomy, neurophysiology, muscle physiology, and biomechanics. If we understand how those things work, we can work out, based on extrapolate from evidence to do clinical things that are good practice, even though we don't have evidence currently to support that, because all the evidence is not there. There'll be years before all the evidence is there. It just can't all be done in one go. And then the other thing that's part of best practice is patient values and preferences. People have to understand what they're doing. They need good education about it, but they also have to be able to think this can fit in with my lifestyle and how I work. What the patient satisfaction is, what the patient goals are. So all those three things come together to form best practice. And what we are particularly good at is incorporating that from all the other sources that are around there, giving people the clinical reasoning strategies, clinical reasoning framework to use your physiology, anatomy, and biomechanics, and then also along with interacting with our clients and patients, understanding what their goals and requirements are, but then putting this into a whole package of framework that around there, and then looking at movement as the diagnostic component behind that. And it's continually evolving. You know, people who might have done some of our courses 10 years ago would find there's a lot of different stuff in there nowadays. It's all up to date, and we're also doing our own research. So we're also so within our team, we're providing a lot of research to support the clinical frameworks that we've got, the clinical ideas. Where there's evidence lacking, we're trying to fill in some of those spaces ourselves.
I mean, that's good. I mean, I think sometimes in the day-to-day that I often forget that, but that is very much the case, isn't it? It's continue evolving, and also it's not just we're taking what's out there in terms of evidence, we're also adding to that evidence coming in from this perspective of knowing the potential of what this can offer, but also just trying to build that evidence base ever more so. So yes, I think that's a really nice overview of where we are with this at the moment. So okay, let's just take it on to another level. So we've reinforced the education, we've identified the testing retraining catalog, we've talked about the book, and we're identifying the e-learning, which we're now sort of involved in. From there, we've got the education routes you could sort of follow. It's comprehensive. We've talked about the evidence base and again how that supports this, but it's also evidence-led and also clinical expertise inspired. From there, we've got a bit more information about the book itself. So the 2012 book, there's also a second edition in 2019, and we can see there's that sort of great forward there as well. Okay, so from there, Mark, what I'm going to do is just talk about a little bit of that sort of route of progression getting us to this point. And I know along the way you've sort of worked with and been inspired by quite a range of individuals. So again, what can you say about that journey?
Okay, it's sort of like we're sort of talking about like a family here. So the whole process, and like the people at the top, Shirley Salmon and Vladimir Yander, I've personally had the opportunity to actually work with, clinically. I've actually been able to work with Shirley, seeing patients in her clinic. When Vladimir was teaching at Queensland University, I was actually on staff there then, so I've managed to actually be in the process of teaching with Vlad in the past as well. And then Paul Hodges, Gwen Joel, and Callan Richardson were people who were on staff. Well, Paul wasn't on staff when I was teaching there, but he's now one of the leading lights. He was doing his honours and master's degree when I was teaching there. So the Paul Hodges, Gwen, and Carolyn Richardson, they've done a lot of work developing a lot of the evidence and research behind the physiology. So Shirley Salmon and Vladimir Yander really started the ball rolling, and then Hodges, Joel, and Richardson at Queensland University developed an integrated process, and that research has just blossomed to many other people doing work in that way nowadays too. And so, we'd almost consider them to be the grandparents of our system, and so what we are now is, so myself and Sarah have been involved in this a long time, and you've come on board now with us as well as part of the team where we're pushing kinetic control forward. So I'd consider ourselves to be the parents at the moment, and then the people are doing the course of the kids, but the kids have got to go out there and work with the world, and so we're sort of, it's almost like a family, and we've sort of building it as we go along, and so what we now have is instructors all around the world teaching our stuff in their own languages and spreading the message. So it does have that family feel to it, but it's all based on the people who have really been influential. So the people who have been most influential in developing the process are Shirley Salmon, Vladimir Yander, then Hodges, Joel, and Richardson at Queensland University, and then we've taken it ourselves. And now, from our website, you'll see we have instructors in 20 plus countries all around the world now, teaching in all their own languages. And this has been a bit of a hiatus this year, but it's all starting to come back, and the online system is going to help push that a bit further.
Absolutely, and inspired by that sort of journey. I mean, this intro to KC is about how we can still sort of continue that journey, regardless of restrictions around the world or whatever may happen in the future. That route is still an option. So I mean, what I can say is, again, from working with yourself and Sarah Mottram there, is that the clinical reasoning framework, the exactitude of understanding movement, the ability to bring in multiple sources into one place within, whether it's KC or TPM. All this is inspired by, it's not just come from one place. So it's always very impressive for me. Yeah, it's a huge education process we're starting if this is your first course, but it is certainly incredibly valuable and incredibly effective within, whether you're working clinically or in sort of performance settings. This stuff is something quite special and really works well alongside other approaches as well. So I think that's for me a bit of an overview. So yes, it's great to be sort of contributing a little bit to this sort of story.
Yeah, we've got a really good team working with us at the moment, building the whole process, and yeah, and spreading the message. You know, giving people access to information, good information.
Okay, so we've given a little bit of an intro to the whole course itself. The first part of the course will be this understanding movement health and choice, and that will be sort of the first introduction maybe to this concept of movement health and the relationship between movement health and choice. It's certainly something that is a key concept in what we do. The session will explore that in more detail, but at this point, I would just say it is about giving the individuals you're working with the ability to choose how they use their movement system in everyday life, and whether that's performance or whether that's just getting back in terms of being making sure they've got their own independence. Movement is a really sort of key quality, and movement health is about looking after the health of the movement system so that people can choose how they move, really, and KC is a way to do that in a very systematic fashion.
Yeah.
Mark, any just final points on what we're going to cover in session 1 there?
Manny, just giving people the message that, yeah, being able to have lots of different options about how we can do things. So having movement choice is movement health is lifestyle wealth. Simply
okay. That. I think that's a nice point to leave it there now. And I think we wish everybody well. We're going through the parts of the course, and we look forward to seeing you on future events as well. So
okay.
For now, Mark, I'll say see you later.
Okay, see you later.
Catch you later, Mark.
Okay, thanks very much.
Bye-bye.